Father Jerome sat in silence in the tall Gothic structure of St. Patrick's Old Cathedral, its stones gazing in mute century over generations, absorbing the history of the city. The cathedral's air was thick with the weight of centuries, the vaulted ceilings echoing whispers of forgotten prayers. But today, something felt off. He couldn't shake it, something heavier. He was young, only 31, and had arrived 2 months ago from a small parish in Pennsylvania. But no matter how loud the city's noise grew, Father Jerome could never forget where he came from. This city, its endless chaos, always felt like a distant dream. Until now. I've seen mysteries in my time, Father Jerome mused to himself. But nothing prepared him for what he was about to face. Vincent Malone, a concerned father, had shown him photos that made even Father Jerome's seasoned heart skip a beat. His daughter, Margaret, a law student, had begun exhibiting behaviors no one could explain. Wild agitation, unnatural physical contortions, and a voice that no longer sounded human. The pictures Vincent had shown? Worse, her limbs twisted in grotesque angles, her face frozen in an expression of agony no soul should bear. And now, Father Jerome was about to face what was far beyond his years of training, his first exorcism. The cathedral door creaked open, and Vincent Malone stepped inside, his wife Caroline by his side. They weren't alone. Their daughter, Margaret, was held up between them, a ghost of the girl she once was. Her body was stiff, her movements jerky, unnatural. Her skin was pale, slick with sweat, her eyes glassy and distant. Father Jerome could feel the weight of their fear, a thick, suffocating fog that settled heavily on his shoulders. "Bring her inside," Father Jerome ordered softly, his voice steady but betraying a trace of pity. As Vincent dragged Margaret into the center of the cathedral, Caroline walked beside him, an expression of hollow hope on her face. Desperation clung to them like a cloud, and in that cloud, Father Jerome could feel the storm brewing. As Father Jerome began reciting the exorcism ritual, his voice faltered, just a moment, a slight hesitation, but he regained control. "Crux sancta sit mihi lux," he began, but before the words could leave his lips, a violent surge of energy shot through Margaret. Her body jerked violently, her neck snapping back at an impossible angle. Her mouth flew open in a guttural scream, a sound not of this world. "You are not welcome here, priest," the voice hissed from Margaret's throat. It was a deep, demonic growl, one that sent chills down Father Jerome's spine. "You think you can save her? You cannot. No one can." The temperature dropped. The air grew suffocating. Father Jerome's breath hitched, his pulse racing. This wasn't a simple case of mental illness. No, this was something much darker. "Vade retro satana," he muttered, trying to steady his voice, despite the shaking of his hands. Margaret's body twisted again, bending in ways that defied human anatomy, her limbs splayed grotesquely. Father Jerome could feel it now, the demon was here, and it wasn't backing down. Her eyes rolled back into her head, and the face that looked back at him was no longer Margaret's. It was a mask of hatred, a mask of pure evil. "You think your prayers can save her?" The voice laughed, cold and malicious. "I've been here longer than you can imagine. I'm not leaving." Father Jerome chanted louder, his voice rising with urgency. "Crux sancta sit mihi lux, non Draco sit mihi dux." The cathedral trembled, the walls vibrated with an energy that made Father Jerome's skin crawl. Something ancient was awakening. Suddenly, a dark mist erupted from Margaret's body, swirling like a living thing, creeping toward the altar. Father Jerome fought to stay focused. "Don't break. Don't look away," he whispered to himself. But even as he tried to hold on to his resolve, something unimaginable happened. The statue of Christ crucified, the one that had stood silent in the cathedral for centuries, began to glow. The stone face rippled, and for the first time in its history, the eyes of Christ turned, locking onto Father Jerome. Father Jerome's blood ran cold. He recoiled as the statue's mouth opened. A voice, low, mocking, echoed throughout the cathedral. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with." The flames around the altar erupted, rising high, licking at the ceiling. The candles burst into flames, sending waves of heat through the room. Father Jerome could feel the suffocating heat, the suffocating presence of the demon. His mind raced. Was this the end? Could he possibly face down such evil? The very walls of the cathedral seemed to be closing in on him. But just as he thought he might collapse, he heard something, a crash. Someone was at the door. The firemen, the police, they were here. With a burst of new strength, Father Jerome grabbed the vial of holy water. He steadied himself. Fiat voluntas tua, he grunted, his voice firm despite the terror threatening to consume him. The demon screamed. The flames died out, the smoke thickened. The shrieks of the demon still echoed in Father Jerome's ears. He couldn't hear anything but its mocking laughter. As the sirens blared outside, Father Jerome stumbled to the door, still in a daze. "It's not over," he gasped to the fireman, pointing frantically at the statue. "The demon's still here. It's never just been the girl." The officers exchanged nervous glances, the skepticism in their eyes barely masking the fear creeping in. "Father, you're in shock," one of them said. But Father Jerome couldn't hear them. His gaze turned to the window, and he saw it. The mist, black and swirling, rising into the sky, spreading like poison. The demon was still out there. As the firemen continued to fight the flames, Father Jerome was dragged from the cathedral. He didn't resist. He had nothing left in him. His heart, his soul, broken. But even as he was pulled away, he knew. This battle was just beginning. The fire truck sped down the road, its driver's face contorted in fear. Something invisible had taken hold of him. And as Father Jerome looked out of the window, he knew, in his heart and soul, that the evil they faced was far from over. This is only the beginning. The war between good and evil had only just begun.